All right. Here we are. Welcome, everybody. Oh, hold on for 1 second. Let me get my mic. Sabrina's telling me. Welcome back to Everything Horses and More weekly podcast. We have another awesome and special guest with us today. You all know who I am, Caroline Bast of the Untitled Horsemanship, and this lovely woman next to me is Sabrina Arbogast, my co-host. She is here, as usual, to take questions from you guys. We've got a jam-packed, I think between my special guest, Brad, who I'll introduce in just a minute, and me, we've got a lot to talk about. And so that if we don't get to all of your questions today, we will continue this. And Brad and I have been talking about that. Maybe this is a podcast that we do monthly. Who knows how it'll work out. So we can just keep educating people. And well, anyway, let me start off with our guest today. His name is Brad Kelley. And hi, Brad, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
Awesome. He is a master farrier. He doesn't call himself that, but I do. Just based upon what I've already experienced, is for me mind-blowing. And for those of you that don't already know, I have been through, what number farrier are we on, girls? Number 5 or 6?
Yeah.
I think number 6 in 2 years. So, and I'm still not happy, and I don't need to get into that, but when I see someone like Brad, you know, and I'm not doing this because his wife is a student of mine and a friend of mine, I'm doing it because I am astounded at his extensive knowledge, and in addition to his extensive knowledge, and that's why I'm calling him a master, it's his approach. And he, to me, is also a master horseman. And that's really important. And I know a lot of our farriers have horses, and they, you know, they partake in recreational riding or reining or sorting cows, or, you know, they enjoy their horses. But I don't know, there's something about Brad that I connect with personally, that I believe everybody that is connected to my work is going to connect to him big time because of his holistic approach. And that's, I think that says a lot right there. So we are, if Sabrina doesn't do it, I know his wife is going to post on the Facebook page, Brad's Facebook. So please go ahead and share that information. You do not have a website, do you, Brad?
No, I don't. When I started doing this, I had looked into getting a website developed. And one of the main website developers in our area told me, of course, at the time, Facebook was, you know, one of the biggest things.
Yes.
He said, I'd love to take your money, but he said, you can pretty much do the same thing, you know, on Facebook, just build a Facebook page.
I agree.
You're going to get more traffic that way. So I went ahead and kept the money in the bank and made a Facebook page. It just kind of grew organically from there.
And that's great. You know, I know a lot about social media and do my own marketing, and I did that in my other life and career. So I totally agree. And if you were also one of my startup clients, I would have told you the same thing, that especially with compared to where I was 10 to 15 years ago, you know, social media is just totally taken off. It is the platform. And it's so cool because you can post, you know, you can do a quick video of what you're doing during the day and just upload it to your Facebook page and ask people to share it. And then, like you said, it grows organically. So it's such an easy way to maintain your presence without having to know anything about the web.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm not too good at. My wife has been encouraging me, I'll use that term, to post case studies and different horses that I work on in rehab, because, you know, she just wants that information out there for people to see the before and afters, and
Yeah.
you know, what's possible. And for me, it's hard because whenever I see a horse suffering, I just want to grab my tools and get to work.
I understand.
And so I'm constantly reminding myself, I have to get my phone out, I have to take pictures.
No, and it takes away from that moment. I get the same feedback from my girls and my staff here, because there's so much that goes on for me too in the moment with my horses. And I don't think about filming it, grabbing my phone, because I'm in the moment, and you know, you like lose that. So I understand. And my what I said to your Ariella, is your wife, as I, as I said to her, she needs to do that for you, you know, as a team. Yep. She can do that for you.
Yeah, it would be helpful. It's tough, but you know, the times that I've done it, it's really been a powerful tool for not only the followers to see what's going on and see what's possible, but actually for myself.
Yes.
Just to go back and you can look back where you started, because it's very easy to forget where you were at day one.
Yeah, the progress of it. Yeah,
and so and even for the horse owner, it's a conversation you have after the feet look great, and they forget, you know, how far the horse has come and how far.
It's hard to measure that. Yes.
The changes that they make in the diet for the horse and movement and the environment. You know, I'm a very small piece of the puzzle when it comes to rehabilitation. I kind of joke around. I tell people I view myself as a glorified garbage man. I just kind of take off the trash, and the horse owner, they do the rest, you know, and we come out with this good outcome.
Oh, hell no. I get what you're saying, but oh no, because we're all of your clients, I'm not your client yet, but it's like, we're on the other side going, God, you can totally destroy our horse, you know? And I've had that happen with a bad trim where my horse is lame for a month and I'm getting x-rays because I'm afraid his coffin bone is going to come through his soul. I mean, you can, no. You don't give yourself enough credit. Oh my gosh, Brad, but I can appreciate I love the holistic approach that you take. All right, well, let me begin, because I'm, like I told you before we started live, I shared with Brad that I have a small list of questions for him. And these are questions that I always ask and I'm always paying attention to. And it's not just for me and my horses, but for my clients. I think this is what I'm going to be able to start with is going to be pretty much a good way for you in a nutshell, so to speak, to summarize the most important parts to trimming a horse. You know, not getting into shoes or wedges or anything specialized, but just a basic, natural, balanced trim. I wanted to just ask you a few questions so that it would just educate people, because it's so hard. It's like hiring a mechanic or going to a doctor. You know, your farrier or a dentist, you know, your farrier is specialized, and we don't know, you know, all of that training and education. So it's a bit overwhelming. I'm speaking for all of us, or a nutritionalist, your horse's nutrition is very overwhelming. So over the years, I've been able to kind of go, well, these are some of the specific questions that do need to be answered. And if they're answered well, then it gives all of us a decent enough education and baseline moving forward when we do hire farriers or when we are looking at our horse's feet. So can you talk to us about, I'm just going to list this, give you my list, and you tell me if you agree with this or not. Let's start there. So when I am hiring a farrier or my farrier has trimmed my horses, I am always looking for a shorter rounded toe. Number one, I don't want to see a long toe, and I definitely want to see it round. Do you agree with that or not?
It depends. Yeah, a short toe or a proper toe length is very important. That is vital, always. As far as the shape of the foot, that is conditional on the condition and shape of the coffin bone. So the hoof wall actually should mirror the shape of the coffin bone. And so if there's changes, bony changes, demineralization of the coffin bone, or, you know, if the horse has had some laminitic flare-ups in the past, the hoof and can change. It goes through morphology. Yes,
but let me ask you this. How do you know what the coffin bone looks like without an x-ray?
X-rays are vital. However, the soul of the horse is kind of our roadmap. So there's landmarks such as,
I love it,
the white line, you know, that goes around the perimeter of the
yes.
soul. there's hoof mapping techniques that you can apply via the landmarks that should allow you to kind of have visual X-ray vision if you look at it that way.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
The frog is a very helpful location, way to see, how things are set up inside the hoof. So if you can trim the apex of the frog where it starts to blend into the sole at the tip of the frog, then there's measurements that you can get from that point to show you where the tip of the coffin bone will be. And then from there, you advance forward about 1/4 of an inch, and that's where breakover should be. So as long as you have your frog trimmed and properly balanced, that's one big indicator. Then the bars themselves, they have points where they terminate, and that's going to show you where the center of the rotation of the hoof should be. So different landmarks on the sole. The sole is our guide, or my guide, every time I pick the foot up. The horse shows us pretty much exactly where they want their footprint to be.
That's amazing. Let's just stop there for a second, because you know your stuff. And I am absolutely, how many of you are listening to this going, oh my God, nobody has ever talked about the hoof. And I personally have probably had 20 farriers in the last 15 years. And I've also been a clinician, and I have listened to farriers presenting at some of these major horse world expos. Oh, thank you, Brad. So I took a note, and my one note is that the sole of the horse's foot is a landmark. It is your roadmap, so to speak, for you to visually see what is going on, whether it's the coffin bone, and then there's the frog. I mean, I can't tell you how many times some of my farriers don't want to touch the frog, or they trim too much off.
Correct.
So let me ask you this about the sole. So do you do a lot of, some farriers don't want to touch the sole, or they do minimal trimming? What do you do with the sole? Do you do anything with it?
At times, I typically use just a stiff wire brush, almost like a brush that you use to like clean a grill with.
Yep.
And I'll clean the foot with that wire brush. And so that's
wow.
going to pretty much take most of the sole that the horse is exfoliating. So knife work really isn't abundant when you use that as a tool.
Well, and that's how you end up getting lame horses. That's how I end up getting lame horses, because they just want to use that knife and shave off so much of that sole. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the one thing that I tell my clients is I really don't care how pretty the foot is on the bottom, because as soon as we're done, the horse is going to step in manure anyways. So
yes.
what I want is I want function. I want function over looks.
Yeah.
And one thing that we forget is we're in a society where the visual is almost everything. And so we want to see a pretty hoof. We want to see, a pretty frog, pretty sole, nice, clean white.
Yes.
And what happens is you see farriers, which they've got reasons when they're applying shoes. They've got certain areas where the horse can't take constant sole pressure, but they get a little wild with it. They just, slice.
Yes.
Take the sole away, and it's just not necessary. So that sole, much like the shoes that we put on our feet, the sole of our shoes offers our foot protection. And so if we were to go and constantly thin the bottom of the shoe that we have on our foot, eventually we're going to walk on rocky terrain and hurt our foot. So same thing goes with the horse. Not only that, but the sole and the frog also support the weight of the horse, the bony column of the leg. So the more you strip the sole away, the less strength you have on the bottom of the foot, and that can cause the coffin bone to descend down through the hoof capsule.
Yes, absolutely. That's why I was so afraid when my 2,000-pound 18-hand Frisian, when so much of his sole was taken off that he was bleeding and bruised. Oh, I fired my farrier immediately, and he was lame for almost a month. And I had him x-rayed. I was petrified, because I'm like, I know enough to know that big, heavy monster horse the whole coffin bone could come through.
Yeah. So there's some safeties there that you can, as a horse owner, you can visually look at and measure, kind of like a safety or like a standard that I try to adhere to for most horses or try to achieve. And that's by taking measurements in the collateral grooves or commissures, which is the groove that runs along each side of the frog. And so I've trimmed a bunch of Mustangs, BLM Mustangs for trainers doing the Mustang makeovers. And I'll give them their first trims, and of course all the subsequent trims afterwards. But what I got to notice when I first started doing this is, of course, most of my clients were having to use hoof boots for their horses to go trail riding. Anything pasture, they needed hoof boots.
Yes.
And so when you think of a hoof boot, what are you doing when you put that boot on? You're basically giving them vertical depth. You're giving them structure that they're obviously missing. So when I got to working on these Mustangs who were running across the desert and, you know, they're sound and one thing I noticed was even if their hoof walls were, their hoof was overgrown around the toe, their heels almost always, not always, but almost always were balanced, and they were consistent in their depths of the collateral grooves. It was almost always 1¼ inches from the deepest part of the collateral groove to the end of the heel buttress, and 2 inches from the hairline down to the end of the heel buttress.
That's amazing. So they just naturally were sloughing off, you know, taking care of their soul and their frog by the way that they were moving and traveling the terrain.
Correct. Yeah. The heels they maintain the heels by impact. So they want the horse to land heel first.
Yes.
So when they landing heel first, once you have their heels balanced, they'll pretty much maintain their heels themselves. And so I got to thinking, I was like, I wonder if I get our domestic horses that I work on, if I can get them to develop their feet to, you know, similar depths, not only just hoof wall, but also obviously if you're going hoof wall, you're developing sole depth as well as a strong digital cushion, lateral cartilage. And so I started down that path and just checking balance, but leaving additional wall height, and allowing that foot to grow vertical depth. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as achieving dimensions of around 1¼ inch collateral groove depth at the heels and around 3/4 to 7/8 of an inch collateral groove depth at the tip of the frog, then all of a sudden my clients' horses were no longer using hoof boots.
Wow.
That's how they were, you know, going on all kinds of rocky terrain and cantering, and the horse was fine, you know, no problem.
So let me ask you this, interrupt you. So I always thought that the hoof boots were to protect the sole. Like if your horse had a really, like my mare Sundance, you know, I'm told constantly, or I was just told by our new farrier last month that all 10 horses here have really thin soles, and most of them have thin hoof walls. And so I always was told that a thin sole on your horse is kind of like going, you know, barefoot, you know, so the rocks are really going to bother them. And you're telling me that it's not, that it's really all about the heel, and the heel is what dictates or controls.
The heel is the start. So in my opinion, my personal opinion, and just from my experience, I feel like the soundness of a horse is almost 90% in the back half of the hoof.
That makes sense to me. That's common sense, because when you look at correct angles and conformation on horses, and I talk about this often, it's kind of like if you have really long fingernails and you're trying to do, you know, as a person, you're trying to accomplish a task, you know, the length of the fingernail, you know, dictates so much of the angle of the way that your hand has to approach something. So I look at that like the foot, you know, and the way the leg, you know, the whole horse is like you just said, the impact, yes. And right above, what do you call that part above the heel, that bulbous part on the pastern of a horse above the heel, because that's where their impact is. It's a cushion. Yes, it's what is it called?
Yeah, the heel bulbs.
The heel bulbs. Yeah, the heel bulbs. So that is basically their cushion. That in the heel.
Yeah. And one thing, and this is like, we could talk on this topic probably for a month. But so what happens is the internal structures, the internal sensitive structures of the heel on most average size horses from the hairline down will come down about an inch or so to the bottom of those internal structures, from the hairline.
Yeah.
So most farriers will trim from the hairline down to about 1.25 inches, and then they'll apply a steel shoe, which gives you about another 1/4 inch. Because we're told that horses need to have low heels so the frog makes ground contact, and which is true. We want ground contact, pressure and release for the frog, so that helps circulation.
Yes.
And that allows the foot to expand and helps with that. However, if you consider the fact that you're trimming heels down, the physical foot that we see down to those dimensions, and your internal sensitive structures are only about 1/4 inch elevated up above that, that's not very much material for that horse to, have impact, for a 1,200-pound animal to, apply all their weight to a heel first impact on rough terrain. Yeah, good on soft pasture, yielding terrain, but on a rough surface, that's just not adequate. And so that's like, say, again, with hoof boots, you put that extra depth on there, and all of a sudden your horse is able to go wherever you want to. So my theory, just looking at the Mustangs, is why don't we leave that material there? So what will happen is if you cause a horse to be painful in the heel area, then instead of having a heel first landing, they're going to start to land with the toe first, and then try to put the heel down because it's very painful.
Yes.
And so by them loading the toe, you're disrupting proper blood flow and circulation. You're putting way too much pressure on the tip of the coffin bone.
Yes.
Which is going to cause, bone remodeling.
Yeah.
And you're going to cause the sole to over exfoliate because it's getting way too much pressure, way too much wear and tear, which is causing thin soles. So that goes back to my original point of, I feel like soundness begins in the heel area. If our horses are comfortable in locomotion, putting their heel down first and absorbing all that impact, they're not going to be putting too much pressure on the toe, which is going to allow them to grow sole depth because we have proper blood flow, we've got proper locomotion, and they're not over exfoliating the sole underneath the coffin bone.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Oh my gosh. I hope everybody's not too overwhelmed by all of that information. The girls are shaking their head here. I mean, it helps when you've done a lot of education, and I've done a lot of reading. I'm not you, Brad, obviously, but it's like, this makes so much sense. And I haven't been able to, we have in one of the courses in the Mastery Membership Program under the Wellness Guide, I have 2 farriers that I fired, but they're in that course for 2 different, reasons. They were being interviewed and talking about what they were doing. But gosh, not at all to the length or understanding the purpose of the heel. Because I see so many horses that have really long heel, which is called underrun. Or I'm fighting to get heel on my own horses. And so I understand enough about what you're talking, the dynamics of the heel is so important, you guys. It is number one. And, rescuing these thoroughbreds from the track, these idiots that train thoroughbreds on the track, you guys, they have a philosophy at the track where no heel, and the longer the toe on the horse, that's going to allow the horse to reach farther, in their stride. And what happens is I inherited 2 horses with stress founder, and no one ever writes about stress founder. I had to literally ask my one vet years ago, do you know it? Is there something called, it was my word, but I didn't realize that it is a real word. I'm like, do you call this stress founder? And Dr. Bull's like, yes, Caroline, this is stress founder because there's no heel. And so the whole impact is in the sole, you guys, in the coffin bone, and then it can kill them. Obviously the coffin bone rotates. I was able to fix the rotation in both of the horses. Not me, but the farrier, and just knowing enough and guidance and coming out and stall rest and minimal activity for these horses. But it blew my mind. And then I've seen, same thing with hunter jumpers, with other disciplines, and with these reining horses I visited with in Italy, Janine and I, their heels were like 2 inches long, and so were their toes. I mean, the whole hoof, I'm holding my hand up right now, and I know we have a delay, but it's like it's like 4 inches, 5 inches, with shoes on, you know, for these, of course, they're doing sliding stops and, you know, but it's just in general, and the same thing with the hunter world or the jumper world. It's like, what's the philosophy behind, you know, so much hoof, both in heel and it's a different type of toe, you guys. It's not this, see, when you have short heel and you grow the toe out, you know, it grows at this weird angle that my hand is showing in the, you know, on the screen, versus when you have long heel and long toe, then the horses, it's like they're on stilts, right? Or they're on, you know, high heels. I don't get it. Because then you just see the whole leg, the whole conformation change on the horse.
Yeah. Yeah, and I kind of liken to like a horse that has underrun heels, and in that situation, you know, where their heels aren't underneath the center of the cannon bone. Almost like somebody, if you're standing on a ladder and you're supporting your weight all, you know, up there by your toe, you have no support underneath your heel, how that feels.
Yes. Yeah.
Has underrun heels. To me, that's exactly what they're feeling.
Wow. Thank you for that.
Base of support underneath them, and so they're trying to have this balancing act, try to keep themselves functional and upright, but yet they've got no base of support underneath the bony column of the leg.
I'm making notes. Thank you. This is stuff I've always, underrun heels. So the heel is not balanced under the coffin bone. And then you giving that analogy is fantastic, of being on a ladder and what that feels like for us, not having support under our heel. And then look at how that affects the whole back of your leg or the front of your leg, and your balance, and the feet, everything. It's all connected. So before we get to questions, I have one more question, because this is awesome. And then we've got a couple of questions from our audience. And then we can talk some more about some of the topics that you personally want to discuss. My next question and last one for you, with my list. Well, I have 2 actually. So what can you do, if anything, for a horse that has a thin hoof wall and a thin sole? I've been told that horses, depending on the breeds, like my thoroughbreds, they have no hoof wall and no sole, you know, thickness. So is there anything that we can do to change that as far as diet, trims?
Yeah, the proper mineral balance is really important. I'm a fan of, you know, either California Trace Plus or KIS Trace or Arizona Copper Complete. They all work quite well in the Southeast region, because pretty much most states in the Southeast have pretty elevated levels of iron in the ground. And so in order to have a strong hoof, we've got to have iron and copper and zinc balanced out.
Oh, wow.
So we want to make sure that our diet doesn't have any added iron to it, because, like I said, the levels are already, you know,
yes.
up in warfare. And so we want to increase the copper and the zinc to offset the higher levels of iron, and that's going to allow the horse to grow a nice, strong, intact hoof wall and much healthier sole.
Thank you. You're a god. I'm telling you, I could cry. I'm asking this question all the time. Farrier's formula, this or that, or I don't know. There's really nothing you can do. It's their breed. And I'm like, I just, in my gut, I'm screaming, you guys. I'm like, no.
I have quite a few thoroughbreds, off the track thoroughbreds, that are jumping barefoot, and they're trail riding barefoot. They've got super strong feet, thick hoof walls, nice thick soles, healthy frogs. Which that's another issue with the back half of the foot, is when you trim those heels down so low, the frog grows just like the rest of the foot. And so, you know, it grows from the frog corium, which is part of the digital cushion. And so the frog grows and can develop and become thick and healthy. But when you trim the heels down so much, the frog gets pulverized because it's getting way too much ground pressure.
Yes.
And so it gets flat, it flattens out, it over exfoliates as well. and it actually, in my opinion, opens itself up to thrush more.
Yes.
Than a hoof that has some ground clearance, with the frog.
Okay.
So kind of like my goal, or what I try to achieve with, let's say, heel and frog balance, is I try to have about 1/4 of an inch separation between the end of the heel buttress and the top of the frog. So what happens is on yielding terrain, even on concrete or pavement, the horse is going to get some frog pressure, ground pressure, because of the expansion of the foot. And then on yielding terrain, it's going to obviously get more. But it's going to allow that frog to grow and develop and become thick. So you actually have frog padding and not just corneum, sensitive hitting the ground, which is, again, going to put the horse up on its toe.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
And that's why I used to be one of those guys that never touched the frog unless there was like flaps here and there. But the problem is with that, what I found is by trimming the frog properly, and what I mean is actually having the frog trimmed to match where it grows from, which is the frog corium. And it's got nice 45-degree angles on the sides, in the collateral grooves, and then it has a nice rounded, and then flat bottom to it. And then it tapers back to the central sulcus, which should be almost like a little thumbprint. And then the end underneath the heel bulbs is nice and rounded. And so if you when I trim the frog to look like it should, you're giving the frog proper stimulation from the ground. It's not just hitting flat and getting smushed over into the collateral grooves. You know how you get to a point in the trim cycle where you can't clean out the grooves next to the frog because the frog is smushed over to the sides.
Yeah, I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah, it shouldn't be that. When you routinely trim the frog properly, the frog maintains that shape. It becomes stronger, just like the rest of the foot. So and again, you don't want to over trim the frog, but you do need to balance the frog and trim and shape it the way that it should be.
Yes.
To grow an optimal frog for the horse.
Oh my gosh.
And also too, you're taking away necrotic tissue. Like maybe you have a little bit of thrush. Well, if you can get that off of there, it's not going to continue to affect the rest of the healthy frog.
I've
never
it.
seen anybody go into a hospital with gangrene and just ask them to leave that part of their body.
Very well put. I love it. Oh, I love it. All right, my last question, then we can get to questions. What about flares? Is it my understanding of when a hoof flares out, whether it's both sides or one side, especially one-sided flares on a hoof, that there's an imbalance, the horse is not balanced?
It can be. It can be partly diet. If the horse, flares can result from diet. If they're getting too much sugar, the lamellar connection will get weaker. And so that will cause flare. But if you're dealing with flare in the back half of the foot,
yes,
9 times out of 10, your bars are laid over. The bars haven't been trimmed properly.
Thank you.
So the bars are laying over on top of the sole. And now this is kind of funny because this is kind of a part where Pete Ramey and we had a discussion about this, and he felt like the wall was flared, which was then pulling the bar and the sole with it. And I told him, I was like, well, I disagree. My opinion, and just from my experience, is that whenever I see flare, the bar is pointing directly to the flare. And once I trim the bar and I keep it trimmed and kind of retrain the bar to grow in proper alignment with its origination point, the flare grows out over time and you end up trimming it away.
Okay, that makes sense.
So my opinion is the foot, and when it hits the ground, of course, it loads up on that yielding terrain, and you get pressure, outward pressure in the collateral grooves, which is going to be pushing outward and allows the heels to expand and open up. So if those bars aren't kept trimmed and in alignment with the collateral grooves in the frog, it gets too long and it begins to get weaker and it lays over. The more that lays over, and then the more ground pressure you get, it continues to put outward pressure on that bar, which then puts pressure on the sole, and then pushes that hoof wall out. And so I never, ever have well, I won't say never, ever, but once I figured this out, I stopped doing pretty much any work from the top side of the hoof. 99.99% of my work is done from the bottom with the hoof in my hand.
Okay.
And so what's happened is by trimming the bars and keeping them in their anatomically correct position, that takes pressure or negative pressure off the sole, which is, pushing it outward. The hoof wall grows down, and that you'll see up above where that flare is, it's got a nice tight connection. Well, if you leave the bar go and you just, like most farriers, they put the foot up on the stand and they rasp the outside of the hoof and make it look pretty. But in a couple weeks, the flare is back.
Yes.
That's because all they're doing is they're thinning the hoof wall and making it weaker, which is just making that flare even more pronounced because it's not got the strength.
Yes, we just went through that and had to let the last farrier go because of that. And
So
so
what I do is I trim the bar and I straighten it up. And then I, of course, trim the hoof wall like I normally would. But then where that flare is, I put a very steep bevel from the bottom, a nice steep 45 bevel, through that area. And so what that's going to do then is I'm going to use the ground forces to put inward pressure on the hoof capsule in that place, in that spot. And so as it grows down, as the hoof wall grows down, then we're putting opposing pressure in that one area, which is going to allow the flare to grow out. And you just simply trim it away as it grows down.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I mean, I will give the last farrier that we got rid of, he did, I brought that up to him about the flares, and I didn't know any more than that, but he's just like, yeah, I got to take care of the bars. And it's just total negligence, but it's just, yeah, I don't even know why it should even get to that point. It shouldn't.
It's gotten to the point to where I can look at a foot and somebody will talk about flare. The people that aren't my clients, I'll be like, if you pick your foot up, your bar is laid over. If you have your farrier do this, 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 and this, it will grow out.
Wow.
And it's always, whenever you have a flare, if you look at the bar, I would almost bet you 100% of the time that the bar is laid over in the direction of where the wall is flared outward.
Thank you. All right, we ready for some questions?
I don't know, are we?
Thank you. Yeah, because for some reason I can't get to questions. I can only see like 4 comments right now. I can't select, I can't get on any comments. So you got to ask, you got to let me know what to ask, Brad.
I told my wife it'd probably be crickets out there.
No, there's the people, we have 85 comments right now. We got to find the questions to ask you. Hold on.
I got one.
Okay.
Lisa Watt, what about a horse who is more flat-footed?
So one of our, not student, but one of our followers, Lisa, is asking, how do you handle a flat-footed horse? Or should a horse be flat-footed? What does that mean?
Yeah, if it's completely flat, odds are that's not a healthy foot, and odds are the foot is too large. The diameter of the foot or the footprint is too large for the coffin bone. So what happens is
it spreads out. Spreads out.
And if you're allowing that foot to flare, or if there's dietary issues where the lamellar connection is weak and it flares out, the sole has to cover the bottom of the foot. It has no choice. And so the white line, the sole, all your landmarks on the bottom of the foot become distorted. So kind of liken it to a pizza. And you're making the crust. If
yes.
you want to put crust and you have a specified amount of dough, you've got 2 options. Because the more you spread that dough, the thinner it's going to become. The thinner that and the sole of the horse, the thinner that sole becomes, the less support the coffin bone has, so it's going to drop down through the hoof capsule.
Okay, that makes sense.
What they call distal descent. And as that happens, then the sole's going to flatten out because it's getting pressure from the coffin bone.
Oh, that makes sense.
That's one scenario. So how you would fix that is, instead of worrying about trimming wall length, instead of lowering wall height, what I focus on is actually collecting the foot together or decreasing the diameter of the foot over time. So So steep bevels, all the way around from heel to heel.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that. And what I do is I typically put those horses on a 2-week trim cycle.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Because we don't want that distortion to continue. It's just going to continue to distort. So it's like you're taking one step forward and 3 steps back over a 5-week period.
Yeah, I agree. 2 week. And that's hard for us to get our farriers to come out every 2 weeks for a lot of us. That is just, it blows my mind, especially when you're doing that much of a corrective trim, so to speak. That's how I would, in layman's terms, call it, where you've got to totally reshape that horse without making them lame. It's like your fingernail growth. It's going to grow so quickly. You'll never catch up with it if you don't do it in a 2-week cycle.
Correct. So I always try to protect the bottom of the foot as much as possible. So like I said, I don't try to adjust the wall height much at all, if any. It's just all about getting the hoof pulled together to its proper shape.
Oh, wow.
It's supposed to be.
That's great.
And what you look at is when you start to make changes for the horse that the horse appreciates, like getting break over where it should be,
Mm-hmm.
and doing all that, start looking at the top 1 inch of growth from the coronary band on down. That's the foot that your horse wants. That's the foot that your horse is trying to grow, and begging the farrier or hoof care practitioner to get that all the way down to the ground.
Yeah.
So, a lot of horses, you can take your hand and put it around their hoof about 1 inch down, and the foot looks beautiful. And then you take your hand away, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's ugly.
Yeah, good point.
So anything from like 1 inch down, that's history. Really can't do a whole lot about it. We've got to grow that new connected wall in from the top.
Yeah.
So that's where you look at the foot, take pictures or look at it from the side, and you kind of visually run that new tighter growth all the way down to the ground in your mind. And that's where the toe should be eventually. You can't get it there right away.
Yeah.
But that's where we want to be. So that's when you start over time moving break over back on the horse. And that's where hoof mapping comes in handy, because and frog trimming, because you can map the sole of the foot out and you can see where break over should be, see how close you are. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll fudge break over a little bit just at the toe, and I'll put like a 10-degree bevel right there, because I'm going to take away, the toe is wore down by abrasion as the foot moves. So the longer the toe, the more it's going to be inclined to, pull forward. So I'll do just a slight 10-degree bevel, which is going to ease break over just that much more.
Fantastic. Oh, wow. Thank you.
So that's one scenario.
We've got more questions though. Hold on, because I'm just trying to get, so listen.
As far as like a flat foot.
Yeah.
And so some horses, the concavity, the solar concavity is almost 100% reliant on the shape of the coffin bone. So some horses have a flatter coffin bone than others. So it's not just have a horse that has concave feet and they've got, that's a healthy foot, because there's plenty of like Tennessee walking horses. They may have a flatter foot, but they've got sole depth. So that's where x-rays would come in handy, or your collateral groove depth measurements.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you. And let's also mention, you guys, whatever we're not able to cover with questions, you guys can email Brad. Remember, you can message him on his Facebook page, and you can get in contact with him that way. So, but let's move on. Let's see if we can get to another question here.
Diane, what does Brad suggest as to how often hoofs be trimmed when barefoot?
One of our followers wants to know how often should a horse be trimmed barefoot? Like, what's the length of time? 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks?
It really depends on the horse and the needs.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Most of my clients I keep on a 5-week rotation here in Tennessee. That's for me a good average, and I keep them out that way year round, because I take care of close to 650 horses.
So wait, so yes, but that's because it's you. It's like, so let me see if I can ask this question for Diane and for the rest of us, me included. It's like, something's wrong with your horse's trim. You don't really know what it is. And it's like, so, often I have had farriers come out on a 2-week rotation just to keep cracks and chips away and thrush away. And, it's like, how do we laymen educate ourselves? I think we need a picture too, you know, of all these things you're talking about, a picture of all of it, so that that gives us a visual baseline of information. And until our horse's foot looks like this, they can't go on a 5-week rotation, right?
Yeah. And that's, correct. And that's what I was saying. It just really depends on the needs of your horse. Like I said, I've got some horses that I trim every 2 weeks. I've got some I trim weekly. I've got some that are 3 weeks.
But ideally, when the horse's hoof is good and
If you
can,
have a healthy,
yes.
strong hoof, anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay,
So
4 to 6, yeah.
I'd say in the 5-week mark, it seems to be good, where
Okay.
it's manageable. 4 weeks for some horses, you're going to be over trimming, so to speak. So very rarely do you see a horse that has overgrown hooves be lame, unless they have a pathology, some issue. But just because they have extra hoof doesn't, they're sound. 9 times out of 10, a horse becomes lame after they've been trimmed. And that's because farriers are taking away way too much hoof.
Yeah.
So 5 weeks seems to be a good rule of thumb. My guideline, and this is kind of an easy, I guess, thing for most people to view, is when I trim a hoof, I like to have about a rasp's width, or maybe an 1/8 inch, or maybe just a slight more of hoof wall beyond the level of the sole, from the heel quarter all the way around the toe to the other heel quarter. Then I'll ramp up through the heel quarter to the heels, where I like to have about 1/4 inch of hoof wall beyond the level of the sole.
Okay.
So that, to me, is a horse that has adequate protection for the sole if they've got healthy soles.
Mm-hmm.
So anything beyond that, like let's say you're getting 1/4 inch of hoof wall to a half, or 3/16 inches of the hoof wall beyond the sole around the toe area, it would be okay to trim if the horse has adequate sole depth. Now, if a horse has thin soles, which there's ways, and I think it would be good if we had a podcast where I've got a camera, because I can show you the rules of like how to spot thin soles, how to, or even come down and do a clinic, for horse owners. I don't know, but
Oh yeah.
There's so many easy ways that you can be shown. Like, I educate all my clients as to what things to look out for, good and bad. Because I want the horse owner to be just as involved as I am, and not more so.
Yep.
But a general rule of thumb, like I say, when I trim a hoof, I like to have about 1/8 inch of hoof wall beyond the level of the sole, around the toe, and then about 1/4 inch beyond the level of the sole at the heels. So if you're going beyond those points, then your horse is probably ready for a trim, if he's not being actively ridden.
Okay, awesome.
Does that answer her question?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And then some, definitely. I mean, everybody's just going nuts here with glee. There's loving everything you're saying, and it's definitely resonating and making sense. I saw one quick question from Eliana in Canada. What do you recommend? It was just a general question. What do you recommend for horses in snowy climates, cold, snowy climates? I don't know what that means. Maybe how often should they get trimmed? But again, that just, you just answered that already, because it just depends on the horse and what shape their hoof is in.
Yeah. Again, for all things, I use the sole as my guide.
The sole is your guide. Yep.
Yep. If the horse has adequate sole depth, which one way to tell, again, is your collateral groove depths. But then also the bottom of the foot, if they have adequate sole thickness, the bottom of the foot should look like a bowl. So it should be a smooth transition from the white line down into the sole, on to the other, side of the hoof to the down.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have let's say at the toe, you've got your hoof wall, your outer hoof wall, inner hoof wall, and then your white line, and then you have a flat ledge of sole, and then it drops kind of abruptly down into the solar area of the foot by the frog,
Mm-hmm.
that's a sign your horse has thin soles. So it should just be like a smooth transition. So if you have a horse that has thin soles and you're in a colder climate, like right now we're due for a cold snap here in Tennessee coming up over the next couple weeks. So the horses that I'm trimming right now, if they've got soles that I'm trying to help them build, then I'm going to leave just a little bit more hoof wall, the length beyond the sole, than what I normally would. So like that 1/8 of an inch, I might leave a 1/4 of an inch,
Mm-hmm.
because I want them to have some additional clearance where, like right now we've also got mud, and the mud freezes and it becomes like a field of just giant boulders.
So let me ask you, why is it important to trim that way in colder weather? What's the advantage?
Again, well, one, maybe some additional traction if you're dealing with ice and like icy snow.
Okay.
But two, if you have a horse that has inadequate sole depth, like say for us, we've got a lot of mud in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
That mud freezes and
Yes.
it becomes like different, like just really uneven, rocky, rigid terrain.
Yes, I remember living up north. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to leave them some additional length of the hoof wall just to give them a little bit more separation between that thinner sole and that rough ground.
Okay. And so if you have a healthy hoof in the cold months, how often do you want to trim? Is it this, like, compare spring, I'm sure it changes with the climate because of the sugar in the grass and.
It does. Yeah. Like here this time of year, like I said, I keep everybody on a 5-week schedule, no matter what, as far as, the length. Like I won't go, longer. I'm going to check on them and just kind of keep my rotation the way it goes, because I take care of the horses. If I show up and a horse, their feet don't need to be trimmed, 9 times out of 10, they'll go another 5 weeks, and at 10 weeks, they'll get what would be considered a normal trim for a healthy foot.
Wow.
So their growth is just slowed down due to several factors. Like say temperature. I think ground temperature has something to do with it, because again, we're talking about blood flow.
Yeah,
cold,
that makes sense.
Kind of constrict. And so in Canada, or in an area where they've got frigid temperatures, your trim cycle might go out to 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. It really depends on your horse. So that's where you monitor. If you're on a 5-week rotation currently, pick your horse's foot up before the farrier gets there at 5 weeks, and kind of notice how much hoof wall is there beyond the sole. And if it's not much, some farriers out there, like I put the horse's foot down and I say, this horse doesn't need to be trimmed and you're not getting charged.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of farriers want to charge, so they're going to take the risk, and they might do something or act like
We've been there. Yep.
So that's where, and I educate my clients, like I avoided an appointment today because she was able to go out, look at her horse's feet, and say, nope, from our discussions, what you said.
Excellent.
Great. They'll make it till next time. So it saved me 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I get that. So basically you're saying that in colder temperatures, it's about, and this makes sense, I've never thought about this, the foot definitely doesn't grow as quickly during the winter time, but it's based more on the blood flow, just being a colder temperature versus nutritionally, because I know, I think we're all educated enough to know what happens in the spring and the fall with the sugar levels, with the grass growing and temperature changes, but definitely even in summer, you can have, your quality of your nutrients in your grass can definitely decline depending on the time of the summer. I see that here in my pastures, right now, in February will become more spring in Florida, even though we have a cold snap and a very cold winter. But Florida, typically February, then March, April, the grass starts to grow. By August, it's so hot. I mean, literally, but we're wet. We've got a monsoon season, so it's not that the grass dries out, but the quality changes. And by October, you can still have grass here, but the horses aren't getting the same nutrients. So I think we have to think about the big picture with, our horses, like you said earlier, the nutrition, the cycle, what's the baseline of the hoof look like to begin with, that's going to dictate so much. But I think just to answer the cold question, it probably would be good for you just to get pictures. Like if you had new clients or existing clients, like I would be sending you a video if you were traveling 2 hours out of the way, like, hey, here's a video of each horse, so that you already know what you're getting into, or instead of coming back to me in 5-week schedule, here they are again. Instead, I think that would help you. I'm just offering some help so you don't have to drive and get so popular. You're going to be flying all over the country pretty soon. I'm going to be working on Florida next, getting you down here, getting a group of people for you, make it worth your while. Okay, so where are we with questions? I know we're not going to be able to cut, Brad, we probably aren't even going to get to any of your stuff today.
Yeah.
We have so many questions. What's the next question?
Rebecca asks, around here, Wisconsin, some put an oil or tar mix on feet in winter to keep moisture in, maybe prevent chipping. I have mixed feelings on this. Any input?
Okay, so one of our students, Rebecca in Wisconsin, says that during the wintertime, they want to put a tar on the horse's hoof to lock in moisture.
Maybe prevent chipping.
And maybe prevent chipping. And we've been told that for the chipping purposes, or to use not just tar, but also what is that chemical in the summer to keep the hoof from getting too wet? I mean, how do you feel about chemicals on the hooves?
Pretty much, I don't know of any of my clients. Maybe there's a couple that use hoof dressings, but I always refer them to natural, like oils that have like tea tree oil.
Tea tree oil.
Yeah, just more natural. I don't like chemicals on a live structure.
So tea tree oil will dry out. So you would use that to keep the hoof dry?
Well, they have it's good for thrush. It's good for but it's good for they have oils that have like linseed oil.
Yeah.
All kinds of different things. There's all kinds of natural hoof oils that are out there. However, if your diet is on point and the hoof is healthy, the horse will naturally balance their own moisture levels.
Isn't that amazing? I got to stop there for a second. And finally, thank you. So I often talk about this, but I don't get into depth because it's such a deep conversation, and I definitely would need to get some research for people to read on. But in my own personal research, and I'm sorry guys, I haven't provided this. I will try, but Brad's going to now talk about it with the hoof. Horses are freaking amazing at healing themselves. Like, I mean, their bodies, it's part of their survival, innate instinctual survival mechanism. And like Brad's saying, that if the horses, let's just say holistically balanced, they're balanced emotionally, nutritionally, they're getting the proper exercise, or at least self-exercise out in big pastures, whatever. He's saying right now that the hoof will produce what it needs to maintain itself. And we don't think like that, and we're not told that, because our society is such a marketing society, and everybody's trying to sell you a product to make money or sell you a quick fix. Nobody talks about, let's just get the horse back to where it should be, holistically, including your hoof care and nutritionally. And that's what Dr. Jeff Tucker talks about, who we support and follow with his organic, no sugar, no carbohydrate diet for your horse, that the horse will eventually be able to rebalance itself and take care of itself, as long as we support that. And the support in the farrier care would be, Brad doing what he's supposed to do, to help the horse maintain the level of natural care. I mean, do you guys get that out there? That we're all being, it's bait and switch, man. Nobody's teaching us this in any of our horse care. And that's why what I teach in the mastery program is to get the horse emotionally rebalanced and providing the nutrition. We've got our farrier here, Brad, providing all the other ways to help the horse get back to balance. I mean, and then the horse can take care of itself. And no one's teaching us this.
When you look at your horse's hoof wall and you see that nice, shiny outer appearance that the hoof wall has,
yeah,
that's the periopal, and that's the horse's natural moisture barrier. So one of the biggest crimes that I see in hoof care is a farrier taking a rasp to the outer hoof wall, making it look pretty. Now, I apply glue-on shoes that allow the foot to function as if it was barefoot for many different purposes. And when I do that, I have to remove the periopal, the outer periopal, with a sander so the glue has a surface it can bond.
Yes.
So the periopal will even keep adhesives from bonding to the foot. And that's how strong it is. The horse naturally replaces that, as it grows its foot down from the top. So we're not damaging the foot, so to speak, when we're doing glue-on shoes, because as that new foot grows in and the horse gets a healthy foot and the glue-on shoes are no longer necessary, that periopal has been replaced. However, with traditional shoeing, with traditional barefoot trimming, if you see a farrier or hoof care provider, whatever you want to call them, put the foot up on the stand and take their rasp to that hoof wall and dress the foot, what they call it, to make it look pretty.
Yep.
Hook up some jumper cables to the rasp in their hand, and that way they'll get the message that you don't want them to do that. So like I say, again, as we were talking before, flaring will be resolved from trimming the foot from the ground, just like the horse does naturally. I've never seen a horse scrape the outer hoof wall on the ground.
You're right.
It always trims itself through proper locomotion. And
Yeah.
it has a 45-degree bevel from the bottom towards the top. So all the distortion will grow out with proper balance and diet. Don't touch a rasp to the outer hoof wall. Now, let's say there's always ands, ifs, buts, or whats. And if I'm working on a foundered horse and they've got lamellar wedge and it gets down so far and I need to get that out of the way, that's a time where...
Yeah, exceptions.
However, in general hoof care, don't touch the outer hoof wall with a rasp, because you're taking away the horse's natural built-in protection for moisture balance.
Makes a lot of sense.
Oh my God, everybody, you have now like doubled your comments. You're like up to 150. Everybody is yahooing. It makes so much sense. Everybody wants you to come to their state. And some people, Brad, you need to think about sharing your knowledge in a way that doesn't compromise, you being able to do your work. So I highly recommend that you start getting an assistant with you so they can videotape and you can put stuff on Facebook, and then you're going to get so busy, you're going to have to start training people.
Well, just prepare your eyes, prepare yourself. Number one, we need to learn what a properly balanced foot looks like.
Yes.
So we're not used to, and our eyes aren't calloused to seeing low heels.
I know.
And long forward toes.
Mm-hmm.
We need to retrain our eyes to see what a healthy hoof should look like, so you can kind of see
I agree.
the condition of your horse's foot, and you can express concerns to your farrier.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, and if they can fix it, hopefully they will, and if they can't, well, then you need to go shopping. But also,
we're out of shopping around here.
We're out of
prepare your eyes.
Like, oh,
Prepare
you
your
are.
eyes to allow the horse, if they have a properly balanced foot from the bottom, allow yourself to see a foot that doesn't look so perfect from the top. Because again, if you look at that top 1 inch of growth,
Yeah.
as long as that top 1 inch, it's always beautiful.
Yeah.
Because that's the horse doing the work right there. That top
That's a
1
good
inch,
point, you
the horse
guys.
is doing it.
Yep. And it's the shiniest
Anything
too.
beyond that, anything beyond that, we're screwing it up through diet and improperly balanced trimming.
Okay. Thank you.
So just allow that ugly foot to grow down and just act like it's not there. Just ignore pathology look at the foot from the top 1 inch down, and as long as that new growth is coming in properly, you have nice smooth hoof wall. It's nice tight connected wall. It might look like a bell bottom, from the bottom or towards the bottom of the foot.
Yep.
Allow it to be that way, and don't be tempted to try to make it look pretty, because the horse is growing the pretty foot with proper nutrition, movement, environment, and proper balance, which is achieved from the bottom of the foot, not the top.
Yeah. Wow.
Eventually, your horse is going to have that beautiful foot all the way from the coronary band down to the ground. Once you get to that point, like a lot of my clients, when I go trim their feet and we get past all this distorted hoof wall, eventually it looks like I had just been there. It's 5 weeks, down the road. It looks like I've just been there. And when you pick the foot up, you just have hoof growth, but it's nice, tight, well-connected wall. Foot's balanced. It just needs to be trimmed. It needs to be touched up.
Yeah.
But the foot itself looks beautiful, and I've had nothing to do with it other than achieving balance from the ground.
Yeah.
The ground out of the foot, and then the rest comes from the horse and the owner with proper diet.
Hallelujah. All right. So I'm not going to touch my phone. Somebody's calling in, but if I touch my phone, I'll end up hanging up on Brad probably. I don't like technology sometimes. Okay, Brad, so let's get to a couple of your personal questions, or not questions, but the things that you want to talk to. And you guys, we're going to wrap this up by 1:30. So I want to give Brad a chance to talk about some of the things that he wants to talk about. And then you all can just message him or email him directly. However Ariella wants to handle that. I don't know if she wants to give Brad's email to everybody or what. So Brad, what do you want to talk about? I have your list here. The misconception that all horses can be barefoot, why steel is not ideal.
Yeah, that's a good topic. And of course, I guess we're probably going to have several.
Yes.
You might have to hear from me again, because there's just a lot. Like I said, I could talk about one topic for hours.
Yes.
Because there's so many different strategies. There's so many different views. There's just so much to weed through out there that, like I say, the marketing side of things really clouds the vision of what's proper.
Yes.
And everybody wants to be right. I'm of the mind, and I've let go a long time ago, and that's why my success rate is where it's at for the horse, is because I started to just listen to the horse. And when you listen to the horse shows you the roadmap through the soul. Things just happen, and they work out for the betterment of the horse. They know what they need. They know what they want.
Yes.
I'm replacing what the ground does naturally for the horse. I'm just a artificial ground.
Gotcha. Yes.
So one important thing is, and when I first started doing this, I was a barefoot zealot. All horses were going to be barefoot. They were going to have beautiful feet, and they were going to run across rocks and meadows, and life was going to be good. And I was so disappointed that there was a lot of horses that I just couldn't help. And, I didn't have, other than hoof boots, which are an excellent tool. Don't get me wrong. I really love working with hoof boots and using them for rehabilitation and as a stopgap from a horse that has an unhealthy, weak, foot to a nice, strong, healthy foot where he no longer needs those boots. So they're a great tool, but they have their limitations.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a misconception, can all horses be barefoot? How many times do you hear the answer being yes? All horses can be barefoot.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's, unfortunately, that's a lie. And that's just a misconstrued thought or vision. In a perfect world, would that be great? Yes.
Well, they are in the wild, but our domesticated horses don't live that life that the wild horses live. So I get that.
Correct. So most horses, and we don't give ourselves enough credit to the fact that we're rehabbing probably 95% of the horses that we touch.
Yep.
Are rehabs.
Yep.
Because they've been shod as a 2-year-old or even younger. Their digital cushions, their lateral cartilage haven't even begun to develop yet.
Oh, so wait a minute, stop right there. So you shouldn't be trimming a young horse until what age?
No, you should trim the horse as soon as they hit the ground.
Oh, okay.
You shouldn't shoe a horse.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Okay.
With feel.
Okay.
Once a foal has a perfect foot from the time it leaves the horse until it hits the ground.
Okay.
Once that horse stands up and it's on our ground, which is typically soft.
Yes. Yes.
Then the foot is going to get weak and morph because it's not having to run from predators with the rest of the herd across rocky terrain.
Correct.
So we've got to maintain balance for that foal or that filly.
Yes.
One of the biggest mistakes that I see is people saying, because they don't want to put the work in of picking the feet up and getting the horse used to things.
Yeah, brother. Yep.
Is, oh, well, yeah, we've got this yearling or we've got this 2-year-old and this is its first time it's had its foot trimmed and the foot is completely out of shape.
Yep.
And
I've seen them.
Have a beautiful foot, but now we've got to rehab this poor young horse that hasn't even begun to live. And they say that the soft tissues, the digital cushion and lateral cartilage, really aren't fully developed till they're about 4 or 5 years old, and that's if they're moving on uneven, different types of terrain.
Yes.
Consistently. So, for most of our horses, you could probably say, 6-7 years, to get a nice developed foot.
Wow.
That's
wow.
Be a case by case thing, but I feel like we're really setting our horses back if we don't start trimming. A lot of foals and fillies, when I first see them, I just take a sanding block because their hoof wall is very, very malleable. Their foot is still developing.
Yeah, it's not real hard.
Yep, I'll take a sanding block. I won't use a rasp, and it's much nicer for the foals because it's much less there's no chatter like you have from the rasp.
Yeah.
And I'll just do a little bit. I'll keep the frog balanced. The bars are constantly laying over on a foal because they're just so thin and underdeveloped. So yeah, you should start trimming them just as soon as possible.
Okay, good. All right.
But so what happens is we're shoeing these horses, with steel, or we're not trimming their feet, at this early age, and so we have different pathologies that develop in horses, whether it's navicular issues, heels that are actually too far open because the bars and the heel buttress hasn't developed, and it's not being trimmed, and so there's no stopping that heel from opening up. There's underrun heels, so many different things. And so, like I say, we're actually rehabbing probably 95% of domesticated horses from some issue.
Yep. So let me ask you this about the misconception that all horses can go barefoot. What's the percentage in your experience of the horses you work with that? What's the percentage that can go barefoot versus the percentage that needs some corrective shoeing?
For myself right now, I would say I've probably got maybe 10 to 15% of the horses I take care of that need to have some type of protection on the foot.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good.
Yep. So, one thing is horses that have lost coffin bone. They've got coffin bone changes like ski tips, or which is where the tip of the coffin bone from too much ground pressure.
Yes, I've seen that.
Chronic founder, what have you, has rolled up. A horse that has a loss of coffin bone material, their capacity to grow sole has been reduced because the sole originates from the coffin bone. So
wow.
Once you lose that and you'll never get it back again, that horse, if he doesn't have adequate sole depth and can't grow at the proper rate, then we've got to do something to keep that foot protected. And so that's where, for me, glue-on shoes come into play, because hoof boots for 24/7 turnout might work for a day or two, but it's just not a long-term solution. So I've searched and found composite glue-on shoes. So it's more like a rubbery, malleable type glue on.
That's nice. Glue on versus nailing into the hoof wall.
Yep.
And if a horse has a really weak hoof wall, like my thoroughbreds, there's nothing nailing. You can't, it won't hold. The shoe won't hold.
Yep. Yep. And there's a way to get thicker wall on horses too, which we can talk about whenever.
Well, yeah, you talk, yeah, I'm taking notes, but yeah, wow.
But so there are times and places where horses, for one reason or another, maybe they've got navicular issues from poor trimming over a period of time, they're going to have protection, and it might not be forever, but it might, because you can rehab horses that are dealing with navicular changes, and they can be happy barefoot. They might not be happy on all surfaces, but on most they'll be good. So it's just, there's degrees of pathology that you have to work at. But if you don't realize what reality is, there's a lot of horses that are not going to be helped properly, and they're going to suffer. And I'm sorry, but there's really no excuse for a horse to be like, you hear this transition time, like, oh, your horse has just got to get used to this X, Y, or Z. Yeah, maybe for a day or two, you might have a horse that's a little bit ginger because they just haven't felt the surfaces, and that's understandable.
Sure.
But if it's an extended period of time, then you need to put something on that horse's foot that's going to allow it to function as if it was barefoot, but give it the protection it needs to be sound and happy. Because all you're doing is you're not just affecting the hoof at that point. You're affecting the shoulder, the withers,
oh,
the back,
yes,
the hips, their mind, their weight.
Yes.
It affects everything.
Yes.
And so I got pretty disgusted with the industry, the barefoot side of things, when horses were suffering because of an ideal.
Yes. Yep. With the disciplines, like I was talking about, the thoroughbred racing to the jumpers to, saddlebred, saddle seat, you name it, the gaited horses. It's like even the reining horses, and these are the top of the world reining horses. I was blown away because of an ideal or a misconception, lack of education, or they don't care that they're compromising the horse's balance and conformation to win, whatever advantage they get.
Yep. And so what was happening is these horses that I unfortunately couldn't help at the time, they were being shifted over to traditional farriers, and they were putting them in steel shoes, maybe heart bars or egg bars, pads, wedges, you name it. And the horse would be okay for a period of time, but then that particular package wasn't working for the horse because the foot continues to get weaker with steel and nails.
Okay, yeah.
It just does. Because the back half of the foot gets taken out of function. The hoof doesn't function like it does if it's barefoot.
Okay.
Well, those internal structures continue to get weakened. Yeah, you can use your horse for a period of time, but okay, well, now we've done a heart bar. Well, that's not working. Now we need to go with a heart bar and a pad. Okay, that works for a period of time. Well, that's not working. Now we have to do an egg bar, which takes the back half of the foot completely out of function. Then we have to do X, Y, Z. Well, now you need to put your horse down because he's just lame no matter what we do. Really can't fix it. And so that really disgusted me. So I was determined to find options for horses. And fortunately enough, there's people out there like, Garrett Ford with Easy Care and many others, Sue Blair with Easy Slipper, that have developed and used materials that allow the foot to function just as if it was barefoot, but it gives them the protection they need. So the internal structures with every stride continue to strengthen, and we're actually healing horses or allowing the horse to heal themselves because they're not compensating movement, and they've got that from there.
That's beautiful. And that that you've done the research and you've sought these people out that have the product that doesn't compromise the horse. It truly does. Oh, Brad, that's just remarkable. A lot of people are commenting still, and you guys will be able to see this when you look at it. I think a lot of people are starting to, I know we're going to have to close this up just because of stuff going on here, busy schedule. But you and I can get back together with another podcast. But you already have all these people want you, so.
As many of these as you want to do, like I say, we can literally take a topic and we could really get down to the nuts and bolts of
We could do a webinar. I mean, we're getting people that are like, why don't you do a webinar where we can do like, pictures and video and there's a lot of ways we can go about this. My marketing mind's already thinking for you specifically, Brad, but thank you. I can't thank you enough. I've never met a farrier like you. I've probably met, like I said, over 20 in my I just got back into horses 15 years ago, so it hasn't been that long, but wow, you are amazing. You are amazing, and we need you. And so you guys, and you know what you're going to have to do is a coaching call for people. You're going to have people, I'm going to set you up, Brad. People are going to
I've done, like, I'll do like hoof markups, and I've done, like, people send pictures. So
Good.
I just did for one of the girls that was Anastasia, I think her name
Yeah,
is.
but you get paid for that, right? You better get paid for that.
I haven't yet.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm going to be your marketing manager. Hell no, you gotta.
I feel bad for the horses, and like I say, it's like with taking pictures. I just want to. I know. I've been there,
and it burns you out. Trust me, you'll get burned out real fast. So you're gonna have to think of a smarter way to reach more people. That's why I did my big program. You got to reach, and we're doing these podcasts, which is giving away, but you can't give it away all the time. But God bless you.
I look forward to doing many more of these, because, like I said, there's just a lot that. Even from horse handling, while working on their feet, there's just a lot that goes into it. Most horses I work on, they wind up falling asleep while I'm working on their feet. Even horses where they've had to be sedated. I'm not a believer in sedating horses. I want them to learn.
And you guys, I've seen a shitload of pictures that that Ariella sent me for the email for this podcast, so I can use a picture for you of each of you. And all of these horses are hugging him, or their eyes are closed. I mean, I love, this new farrier of mine. He won't kneel down for the horse. He's asking me to drug, my older horses 3 days ahead of time. He wants me to use Butte, or just because of their pain. But I asked him. I said, all you have to do is kneel down and not raise their hips, and they won't be in pain. But he doesn't want to work that way. He wants me to drug my horses. So Brad, I'm not going to be keeping him very long. I just have to make it worth your while to come here.
I told my wife that we would. So.
All right, well, we'll talk about that. I'm
in Florida.
Yeah, then I'll get out there and see how many people we can get in Florida to so you could spend like a week in Florida and make it worth your while. You know what I mean?
That'll work.
Yep, I know Ariella, he kneels down, and it makes me so pissed off with these guys and their fucking egos. Anyway, sorry. I don't get me going. It's not just men, it's women too.
Anytime you'd like to do another podcast, or like if you want to do webinars.
Yep, we'll talk. We're gonna set some stuff up. All right.
I haven't even scratched the small surface of what my beautiful wife had kind of topics she prepared.
She is beautiful. And yeah, and we have to be careful too, because you're brainiac and you are a sponge, and some of this stuff is exhausting, for a lot of us, where our brains are not ready to absorb all of the technicalities of the information. So you have to bear with us, okay?
Yeah, I love all the clients that I have, for the most part. When I'm working on their horses' feet, I'm explaining, which is another point. I'm explaining everything that I'm doing and why.
Yes, me too.
That's not willing to answer questions and have an explanation as to why they're doing what they're doing and what their goal is by doing that.
Or they get offended.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then run the other way, because they don't know what they're doing. They're just, taking a shot in the dark.
Yeah, trust me. All right, well, I will be contacting you personally. All right, we are going to say goodbye. You are amazing. I could cry. I think everybody feels the same way, both in happiness and joy to have found you, and in frustration.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Like I say, when I get started.
We're going to have you back, trust me. And you already have a whole new audience that is going to be contacting you. So you guys better be ready for the influx of new clients. All right. Thank you, Brad. Thank you. God bless you. And you guys, we will get them back. Trust me.
All right, I sure appreciate it.
Thank you, hon. You have a
Bye.
good day. Bye. Thank you, Brad. Thank you. All right. Wow. I mean, I don't know about you guys, you know, these are so, for me, I've been wondering about this and doing my own little bit of study here and there over the years. I'm still such a layman, but my brain is full, you know, so I can only imagine. That is a lot of information, and oh my God, I am so excited. Okay, so we are booked for next month. We're booked this whole month with our podcast and booked for next month. It doesn't mean you all can't contact Brad yourself. And they also have a nonprofit. I don't know the name. I forget Ariella, but if Brad is too kind and humble to take money from you, I'm going to shame you all. And anyone that contacts him and is desperate in a good way to get his help, please donate money to their sanctuary. They have a 501c3, so it's official, and they can accept donations. They're probably just started and they're not ready. But damn it, you better pay him a minimum of $25 if you're gonna be picking his brain. Holy cow, because you know he's gonna be able to verbally help you. But then, oh, here we go, egos with our current farriers. Are they gonna be willing to take what he says and work with him? That's the question. So anyway, thank you all. Please share. Here we are, Healing Hands Animal Rescue and Rehab, and Brad's Facebook page, Brad's Natural Hoof Care. It's on there. So they have all types of animals, you guys, not just equine. And you don't need a website right now, Ariella. You'll get there. Just stick with the Facebook page. And you guys, please share this wonderful person and his knowledge. And then we're going to do our job down here in Florida to get him enough business. So it's way worth his time to come all the way down here. I mean, we've got 10 horses here. You've got 3 of your own. And, you know, so let's all work together. All right. Love you. God bless you guys. May you always be one with your horse, and we'll see you next week. Oh yeah, next week's podcast. So February 10th, we are going to be talking with another Mastery member student all the way up in Canada, Eliana. And the topic for next week is being paralyzed by fear of doing the wrong thing. Then I found the answers in the MMP, Mastery Membership Program. So we will look forward to all of you guys. All of these are amazing. Everybody's got their personal stories to share and questions. So I will be interviewing Eliana, and she will be interviewing me. Remember, guest speakers, if you are a student of mine or just a guest speaker, you can always ask me questions too. This just isn't about, I wanted to give Brad a platform and give that to him. So I didn't expect him to talk about what I do. But for the rest of you, remember, this is Q&A too. So, you know, put your comments in there and your questions in there. And this is for you guests. And I know Eliana might have signed off already from today's podcast, but I'll remind her, all of you, you know, that are coming up, you can ask me questions too. This is a give back to you. You're sharing and promoting my work. And if you've got specific questions about where you are in the program, do not hesitate. Okay, I'm always there for you. All right, God bless you all. May you always be one with your horse. And
Bye.
see you next week. Bye.